And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to check out an expansion for one of my favorite games for the year it was released. I can't remember if it was 2011, I think it was 2011, but it could have been 2010 or even 2012. That game is Belfort by Tasty Minstrel Games. Now this is the Belfort expansion. It was a Kickstarter project. You can see this is one of my unopened copies because I pledged with a group of people, but I have my copy integrated with my copy of the game. Real quick, we're just going to check out what comes inside of this box basically. We're going to see what the components are that have been added. I'll talk about how they changed the game without showing you the actual game itself, but we'll talk about the integration of these components into how the base game plays. And if you're interested, you can check out my video of Belfort that I did previously. Just search for Belfort Ryan Metzler on Google or go to the Dice Tower site and look for it there to see how that game plays. But anyhow, we're going to look inside of this box real quick. We'll see the components. I'll talk about how it integrates with the base game, and then we'll come back here at the end and I'll give you my opinions. I won't get any opinions, but I'll give you my opinions of the Belfort expansion. So here you can see part of the Belfort expansion. These are going to be the different types of minions that you can recruit during the calendar phase, which is basically at the start of each of the turns. You're going to recruit these in reverse turn order. So whoever's last gets to pick one first, and whoever's first gets to pick one last. There's going to be one more of these available than there are the number of players in the game. So you're going to kind of randomize them or choose them however you want to make them in the game, but there will be one more of these available than the number of players. Now, each of these has a different ability. They're used at different times, and I'm going to vaguely cover them just so you can get an idea of how they change the game. So, for example, we have the Djinn here. When you have him, during the actions phase, you can trade in victory points to get resources. 1 victory point for 3 or more as the game goes on. Each one of these abilities will change depending on what season you're in, usually getting better as you progress from spring to summer to autumn, although not always true. You have things like the Hobgoblin, who's going to let you build your properties cheaper. So if you're going to build something, you can pay 2 resources less. And the more or the further you are in the game, the more different properties you can get a discount on, with up to 3 when you're all the way in autumn. The Halfling here is going to let you pay a different value for taxes than what you usually should. At the beginning of the game, you're actually going to get money, and towards the end of the game, you're just going to pay less than you're probably going to owe. The Pixie will let you score one area on the board whenever you like. So during the actions phase, you can choose an area to score. The scoring will be better as the game progresses. We have the Gargoyle here, who's going to let you pick up extra property cards at the end of your turn, where X is a value that will change as you go further in the game. You'll pick up X property cards and add them to your hand from the discard pile. We're going to have the Gorgon, which is going to get placed when you pass from placing all of your guys. When you do so, you're going to put her out into a certain area, and during the actions phase, anybody that builds there has to pay you, and if you build there, you're actually going to get money, depending on what part of the year you're in. You have the Centaur, which when you get him is immediately going to let you place him on one of your own gnome areas on one of your built properties, and that's going to unlock that card for the remainder of the round. In addition, you're going to get a discount for buying a gnome if you decide to do so, depending on what phase you're in or what season you're in. We have the Giants here, which are resource collectors, and when you place, you're going to get some of these Giants, and you'll be able to place them when you pass in one of the areas for collecting resources, and they're going to count as an elf or a dwarf, each one of these tokens, for each one of you place, and they're going to let you collect more resources and change majority. The Imps are going to be tokens that you're allowed to place onto other players' unlocked gnome spots during your actions, and so let you going to take actions with their buildings that they've built. Earlier on, you'll only get 1, but later, you'll get 2. And finally, we have the Goon. The Goon is going to let you place somewhere out onto a guild that someone has already placed on. You'll have to pay, but what you'll have to pay will be different depending on what season you're using the Goon in. So as the game gets better, you're going to actually have to pay less. So, at the beginning of each calendar phase, in reverse turn order, each one of you is going to draft one of these, and the next calendar phase, you'll return them and draft them again, giving you a different ability each turn. Instead of using your minion's ability during your turn, you can decide to forego that and instead flip him over during your actions phase. What this will do is it will let you get a different part of the expansion, which are called the actual expansions for your buildings that you've built. When you do this, you forego the action that's printed on them, but it allows you to take one of these expansion permits. These permits exist for each of the different types of buildings you can build. There's a pavilion for the gardens, or a foundry for the blacksmith, a treasury for the bank, and so forth and so on. Now, depending how many players there are, there'll be more or less of these. But basically, you're going to be building these out to make your buildings a little bit better and change endgame scoring is really what the goal is here. So, for example, when you build one of these, you flip this over, you'll have to have a gardens built, and you'll put this pavilion underneath the gardens ready to be built. So, when we do this, we're basically going to put this out like this. It's not built yet, but we have the permit to build it. You can see it right here. During your future turns, when you're placing, you can place on these spots. So I could place on this plank and pay a wood back to the supply, and it's going to let me upgrade this during the actions phase. When I decide to activate this, taking my worker off, I'm going to have to pay 2 more wood. But if I do, it's going to upgrade my gardens into a gardens plus a pavilion. At the end of the game, I'm going to score victory points for every 5 wood I have invested in building. So right now I have 3. If I got up to 5, it'd be worth 1 victory point. Each of these different expansions for the different buildings is going to let you score endgame in a different way. So that's the other pavilion, but the blacksmith is going to cost metal to build, and it's going to give you points for every 3 metal that you have invested in buildings. You're going to take a look at the treasury, which is going to give you a point for every 3 money that you have at the end of the game. Or you're going to look at the plaza here, which is going to take 2 workers to build and 2 resources, but it'll give you a point for every guild you've built. And there are points given for several things. Stone you've used, or different districts that you've placed in, or each combination of 3 workers you have. All of these are going to be end game points that you can get, and they're going to have different specialties based on the different types of buildings that you've built and the different expansions that you have out on the board. The final change to the Belfort expansion is there are 5 new guilds that you have that you can place out on the board. Essentially, these are just new guilds that you can randomize in with your other ones. They all have different abilities. So this one is, when you place on it, you draw 1 property card and 1 trading post visit, and you hire 1 gnome for $1. So that's what the Clipboard Makers Guild is going to do. The Decorators Guild is going to let you place a money from the supply under 2 of your own houses, and each house is worth an extra half a point when you're determining majority. So it gives you a half a point of majority control. You have the Assistants Guild, which says on placement you can take the remaining assistant you may activate it this round. So there's always 1 more than the number of players. You can take the extra one and use it. You have the Non-Human Resources Guild. So you can take a look at this one. It says on placement, you can gain any 3 workers, and at the end of your turn, you actually have to return 3 workers, but they don't have to be the ones that you gained. And finally, you have the Planners Guild that says you can take up to 2 expansion permits for properties that you've already built. So you actually don't have to use your person flipping them over in order to take expansion permits. You can use this to take them. So 5 new guilds to help keep the game fresh for you when you're playing Belfort. Well, there you have it. That is the Belfort expansion. Now, I have several things to say about this. None of them really bad, but and most of them actually good. So let's just get that right out there now. I like this expansion quite a bit. There are a couple of things that I find a little bit different, and it really changes the base game in some aspects, whereas other aspects, it hardly changes at all. So let's talk about that. The assistants, or the minions, whatever you want to call them, those are excellent. I like them a lot. I really like the fact that they actually change the game on a certain dynamic of the game in very, very strong ways. So it used to be that going first was almost always a good idea in Belfort. You'd like to be first. Sometimes being second or third was okay. Being last wasn't really the greatest option, in my opinion, in Belfort before. Now, being last can be a huge advantage, especially early on in the game, because choosing a better assistant can drastically change your turn. Most of these assistants, maybe all of these assistants, are very good. Now, like things like the Pixie, early in the game, it's maybe a victory point. It's not great early in the game, but if you have first choice of assistant, you're going to get a great assistant. It's going to be something that lets you build for cheaper, or get more resources, or whatever the case may be, even not pay taxes, which is so amazing at times. So being last now is a huge option. Being first, usually you wanted to place first, you wanted to activate first, you didn't want to get stolen from. Now maybe you want to go last because you want to get that benefit, and you can kind of finagle things other ways so that you don't get hurt too badly by not placing or getting stolen from. So that completely changes that dynamic just by adding those small little things, and I really like that fourth is now good. Sometimes, and first is also good, but you're not sure which one you want, and you have to weigh and balance that. However, it does completely change that aspect of the game. Now you really have to pay attention to what's going on with turn order, and it just adds a little bit of time to things, which maybe isn't the greatest thing overall, but still, I like it. The expansions, the actual physical expansions that you can take by flipping over your guys instead of taking their abilities, I'm not sure how much I really like that compared to actually having the assistants in general. I feel like it was kind of an option added on just to make sure that if you couldn't use your assistant, you could, and it gave you something else. And yes, it adds the endgame scoring, but a lot of the times the demands that it takes in order to build these things, I feel like they're outweighed by being able to build your actual properties, use your actual properties, get more workers, which will likely score you more points in the long run overall. The points that you're getting from these expansions, there's one that gives you a point for each expansion you have. That's decent. There's one that gives you a point for every 5, stone you've used or something like that. Well, are you going to build 20 stone and get 4 points? Probably not. Would it be better to have a majority in elves, which is worth, 3 points? Probably, because that can repeat over and over again. I don't know. I just felt like they weren't as game-changing as the minions or the assistants. Not my favorite thing overall, but they're there. And one player did manage to score a significant amount of points on them in one of our games. The others kind of ignored them a little bit more. The guilds are a nice touch. They add extra stuff. I mean, who doesn't like extra variety? Great things. I like it a lot. Add more guilds. Keep doing that. Add more guilds. Keep the game fresh. Love it. So overall, I think the assistants and the guilds a little bit better than the expansions, but all 3 nice, refreshing changes to add to the game. They add different variety for scoring or different gameplay. Overall, a great expansion. Definitely check this one out. That's the Belfort expansion by Tasty Minstrel Games.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.